Hello, my name is Keith, and these are my stamps. Today, episode 16, Antigua and Barbuda. We remain in the Caribbean, the Eastern Caribbean. Antigua and Barbuda has the Atlantic Ocean to the east and the Caribbean Sea to the west, and it's in the Leeward group. Antigua comes from the Spanish meaning old, named after Santa Maria la Antigua, the patron saint of Seville Cathedral. Barbuda, also from Spanish, meaning bearded, possibly from the bearded fig trees that grow on the island. Antigua and Barbuda are a group of 54 islands. The main three are Antigua and Barbuda and Redonda. Altogether, the total area is around 440 square kilometres, 170 square miles, which is about 3/4 of the size of Chicago or 3/4 the size of the Isle of Man. Both Antigua and Barbuda are mostly flat with a tropical climate. The capital is on Antigua, St. John's. Codrington is the capital of Barbuda. The overall population is just over 106,000, which is roughly the same as Bath in the UK or Fort Myers in Florida. The history of Antigua started around about 2400 BC with the Siboney people. They seemed to have mysteriously disappeared. The Arawaks took over from 35 to 1100 AD. The reason for them leaving is more well known. The Caribs attacked and they took over the islands. In 1493, Columbus encountered the islands on his second voyage and named the larger island Antigua, or I'm sure he would have said Antigua. In 1632, the English settled in Antigua. They arrived from St. Kitts nearby. In 1684, Sir Christopher Codrington arrived. He established sugar plantations using slaves. The name Codrington is where the large town on Barbuda gets its name. In 1784, Horatio Nelson arrived to develop the British naval facilities at English Harbour. He, however, wasn't impressed with the islands. He called them a vile place and a dreadful hole. In 1834, abolition of slavery. In the 19th and 20th century, British colonial control continued until the mid-20th century, when there was a push for self-governance, and associated statehood was achieved in 1967. Antigua and Barbuda managed their own internal affairs. Britain retained control of defence and foreign policy. Full independence was granted in 1981. Despite what Nelson said about the islands, tourism is now around about 80% of the GDP. The stamp issuing history. There have been stamps issued inscribed Antigua, inscribed Barbuda, inscribed both Antigua and Barbuda, and also stamps released that have been inscribed Redonda, which you may recall is the third of the islands, the large islands in the group. However, Redonda is uninhabited. Quite why stamps were released with their name on, I do not know, and I don't have any. So, from 1862 to 1981, there were stamps inscribed just Antigua. In 1922 to 1924, there were Leeward Island stamps overprinted Barbuda. From 1968 to 2000, there were stamps just inscribed Barbuda, many of which were issues from Antigua that were overprinted with Barbuda. So they were happening at the same time and they were legitimate in both areas. From 1979 to 1991, that was when stamps inscribed Redonda were issued. And finally, from 1982 to present, that's when stamps that have been inscribed both Antigua and Barbuda. The currency. The initial currency was that of Britain from 1862 to 1950. At the time, 12 pence making 1 shilling and 20 shillings, the equivalent of a pound. From 1951 to 1965, the British West Indies dollar was used, 100 cents to the dollar. That changed to the Eastern Caribbean dollar in 1965, 100 cents to a dollar still, and that is the currency that is currently still being used. I'll put links for many of the sites that I've used for the information in the description. These are some of my stamps from Antigua and Barbuda. I'll begin with the ones inscribed just Antigua, moved on to the ones inscribed just Barbuda, and then finish with the ones that are inscribed with both. So, for Antigua, these are the oldest that I have. On the left, the 1 penny, there are around about 9 variations of this, released between 1863 and 1884, with the watermark being one of the defining characteristics. Some have a star, some have a crown and the letters CC, and others have a crown with the letters CA. Now, normally, I am not very good at figuring out watermarks. I don't use all those different liquids that you can get and all of that kind of stuff. However, in this case, luckily, I can, just by turning it over, can quite easily see that this 1 penny has the crown with a CC. So that narrowed it down to 4 variations, and that depended on colour and perforations. Again, I'm not really, one of my strong points is not working out perforations. However, as far as I could tell, this one is a scarlet rather than a lake, so it's from 1872. The 4 pence only has 2 varieties, so that made life easier. And once again, the watermark was plainly visible, and meaning it's from 1879. This is an original from 1908, the colony seal stamp, but has been overprinted wall stamp. There were 2 issues of this. The first issue in 1916 had a black overprint. This red overprint was from 1917. Moving on to King George V, and here he is shown with the view of St. John's Harbour, which you'll recall is the capital of Antigua Barbuda. The halfpence and 1 pence are from 1921. From 1929, the 1.5 pence. Luckily, the variations of this were far easier because it's just a colour change. This is the 3rd issue. A coronation cover, first day cover, for King George VI and Queen Elizabeth. And this, like many stamps, was repeated across different Commonwealth and British territories. This cover was addressed to E.D. Bowie, who I looked up, and it turns out was a bit of a dodgy character as a stamp dealer. He was prosecuted for forging cancels on normal stamps to make them into first day covers. I don't think this is one of them, because the cancels aren't that good. I think if he had faked it, they would be a lot better. There was quite a lot of information I found out about faking cancellations, which I hadn't ever even heard of before. So that was quite interesting. I've put a couple of links in the description should you be a little more interested in finding out about that. The next 2 monarchs of, well, for Antigua and Barbuda, but of course for Britain, King George VI on the left and Queen Elizabeth II on the right. They changed, obviously, the picture of the monarch. They also changed the colours and the different views for different denominations, but they also changed by now the currency. You'll notice that for the King George VI stamps, it still has the D, which is the old British pence. And then for Queen Elizabeth II, we've moved on to cents, which was the British West Indies dollars. The King George VI stamps are from 1938, and the Queen Elizabeth ones are from, well, 1956, the half cents, and 1963, the 2 cents. And the 2 cents and the 1.5D stamp shows Nelson's Dockyard, which was the area that Nelson developed in English Harbour when he was visiting. The next couple of slides show two typical stamps issued by Commonwealth and British territories. This is for the 400th anniversary of Shakespeare's birth, a first day cover from 1964. And this one is one of a series of Churchill commemorative stamps, this one from 1966. This set of stamps from 1970 showing ships and sailors. There are altogether 17 in the set. These are the 6 that I have. And they show from left to right, top to bottom. First up, the Carib Indian who took over from the Arawaks. Well, I don't think he did it on his own, but they took over from the Arawaks. Then Columbus and one of his ships, La Nina, sailing past in 1493. The third stamp, the 5-cent stamp at the top, Nelson and HMS Boreas. At the bottom, the 10 cents, Blackbeard and a pirate ketch, quite possibly Queen Anne's Revenge. He sailed around the Leeward Islands in 1717, 1718, causing quite a lot of chaos. 15 cents, Captain Collingwood, who, with Nelson, landed on Antigua, and both apparently were smitten with the Royal Commissioner's wife. And the final one is the 35 cents showing King George V, whilst he was a prince. He was in the Royal Navy and he toured the Caribbean for a couple of years from 1879. I wanted to show this one as I'd shown the Anguilla version. This is Antigua's version. I've put the Anguilla one up there. Anguilla, sorry, I should say. As you can see, the photo and the kind of shield shape exactly the same. It was just the background that changed. This was from 1972. Here is a postcard with a stamp from the Flora, Fauna and Island Scenes series. This series had 2 print runs, the first in 1976 and the second in 1978. And helpfully, there's a very easy way of telling them apart because they put the date on the bottom of the second run, like this one. So this 25-cent hibiscus stamp is from 1978. Here are 3 series that were all close in date from 1976 mostly. And the reason I've put these 3 is to show that there wasn't really a consistency with how the stamps were inscribed. I don't mean the name, I mean whether there was any kind of representation of Britain on there. The series on the left from the Fauna, Flora and Island scenes, just as the postcard stamp we saw, it has a picture of the bust of Queen Elizabeth II. The top stamp, the hummingbird, is from 1976, no date. The pigeon at the bottom does have the date, 1978 at the bottom. The centre 2 stamps, also from 1976, for the Montreal Olympics, has no indicator at all for the Queen. And the set on the right, Water Sports, was released later in 1976, and this one has the royal cipher. And as far as I can tell, it was the last set, except for the 1978 reprints of the Fauna and Flora series, that have any royal indicator on them. And previously, there didn't seem to be any kind of logic, or at least none that I can see, as to whether the cipher was chosen, the bust was chosen, or neither was chosen. On to Barbuda, and this is from 1922, a Leeward Island stamp of King George V, overprinted with Barbuda. And we're back, of course, to use the British currency of the time, 1 shilling. From the time when Barbuda's stamps were inscribed already with Barbuda, this was the first set issued in 1968, showing the map of Barbuda. A Flora, Fauna and Island Views series from Barbuda, 1974 to 1975, and these are all from 1975. From 1979, the 30th anniversary of the International Civil Aviation Organization. From 1981, they issued these stamps for the wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Diana. It was the first issue. There was a second one coming up. And the top three each have 2 stamps of $1, 2 stamps of $1.50, and 2 stamps of $4, showing Buckingham Palace at the top, Carnarvon Castle in the middle, and Highgrove House at the bottom. And the $5 mini sheet at the bottom shows St. Paul's Cathedral. The second issue for the royal wedding of Charles and Diana was this one, where you can see the Barbuda version is just an overprint of the Antigua version. Both are, of course, the same, showing $5, the coach that the Princess Diana used. And finally, we are now after independence, and stamps are now inscribed with both Antigua and Barbuda. And these are the 2 most recent I have. Antigua and Barbuda have released several issues using Disney and Disney characters. The one on the left here is from 1988, and it shows scenes from Disney's Epcot Center in Orlando, Florida. On the right, from 1998 series Lighthouses of the World, this is the Groen Point Lighthouse in South Africa. And it's quite interesting, I think, looking at the stamps of Antigua and Barbuda, because it shows, I think, quite a typical journey from starting out with rather simple pictures of monarchs or pictures of coats of arms, that kind of thing, moving on to views of the island, things to do with the country issuing the stamp, maybe the history, maybe famous people, that kind of thing. And then in later issues, really things that have nothing whatsoever to do with the country that's issuing the stamps, and they're more aimed at the stamp collecting market, perhaps. As a for instance, for the Lighthouse of the World, Antigua does have lighthouses, but they decided not to put any of their local lighthouses in this issue of 9 stamps in this series. They're all from other countries. However, these are my stamps. I'm Keith. Goodbye.